906 to flame frags. Skull and Crossbones. Tearing Lucas was killed by Tojima. Dr. Information source Toolta. Duel. Skull and Cross. 15 anti. Like. Skull and Crossbones. Big Shearf was killed by Gaia 011474 with 1. Skull. Skull and Crossbones. Skull and Crossbones. Skull and Crossbones. Sammed. A gamer was killed. Big Shearf. Spawn. Skull and Crossbones. Hydrosopras 80. Skull and Crossbones. Dusky 90 was killed by Lophius _ with 20.0 health. Cross Swords Custom Q Mace, please join. Needs 19 more players for 10v10 on Forest, join here. Skull and Crossbones. Sitmarcy died. Skull and Crossbones. Flamefrag ZZZ _ was killed by Zev 9454 with 2.0 health. Lophius _ GGS. Skull and Crossbones. BLG 1974 was killed by J3MPO with 8.6 health. Skull and Crossbone 2. Skull and Crossbones. Phasiston was. Skull and Crossbones. Coconut 1260 was. Skull Y4. Skull and Crossbones. Sil. Skull and Crossbones. Chris 62009. Skull and Duels. Your game is Nighter Dawn. Cross Swords Custom. Skull and Crossbones. Skull and Crossbones. Skull and Crossbones. Ma 769 was killed by Hopebop with 10.4 health. Skull and Crossbones. Gokuspiel. Skull and Crossbones. Grungy Broom 500. Skull and Crossbones. Skull and Crossbones. Marmistashai was killed by Spielk with 1.3 health. Dougie 006 GG. N4 Shy _ GG. Shazi Kemi 99 GGS. X2 Metro 757 GGS. Skull and Crossbones. Urzi _ 956 was killed by KN _ 413 with 10.9 health. Skill, GGWW. Skull and Crossbones. I Love Agapples was killed by Stefan 14 with 19.0 health. Skull and Crossbones. Danielum 12 was killed by Hog2 Rydrog with 19.1 health. Skull and Crossbones. Ruben Hro 2022 was killed by Zev 9454 with 2.1 health. Skull and Crossbones. Wakovec was killed by Moggins with 20.0 health. Welcome. Ultraman 7906 to Flamefrags. Airplane Webstore store.flamefrags.com. Envelope discord.gg/flamefrags. Welcome. Ultraman 7906 to Flamefrag. Skull and Crossbones. Pechenicus. Skull and Crossbones. Bigger Sneeze 2. Cuberskin Brew. Cross Swords Custom Q join 5v5 needs 9 more players for 5v5 on Forest, join here. Plus. RXOR 8972. Cross Swords Custom Q hopefully may / needs 16 more players. Skull and Duels. Skull and Crossbones. Skull and Crossbones. Skull and Crossbones. DXNZX 224 was duel. Skull and Crossbones. Cuberskin. Crystal 2. Skull and Crossbones. Misket 98 was killed by Mirby 1 with 20.0 health. Skull and Crossbones Fries 42 died. Skull and Crossbones Franklin 133 was killed by Gamer Shadows 157 with 14.5 health. Skull and Crossbones Niterdon was killed by Silent Fragger with 20.0 health. Skull and Crossbones Jody was killed by Klepto King with 9.6 health. Skull and Crossbones Artie Bubbles 7129 was killed by Aurora with 20.0 health. Skull and Crossbones Phasiston was killed by Swag Ducky with 20.0 health. Cross Swords Custom Q hopefully Mace / needs 15 more players for 10v10 on Forest join here. Skull and Crossbones KN_413 was killed by Shazi Pemi 99 with 8.2 health. Aurora, GG. Shazi Pemi 99, GGDS. Skull and Crossbones Vladdy 6 was killed by Arakun with 8.7 health. Skull and Crossbones Ruben Coet was killed by Y4 Cup with 6.9 health. Cross Swords Custom Q join 5v5 needs 3 more players for 5v5 on Forest join here. Cross Swords Custom Q Netherite Mace needs 17 more players for 10v10 on Coral join here. VX Coco 3, lag. Skull and Crossbones The Reality was killed by Potatogui 1231 with 18.0. Yan 242, you quit. Cross Swords Custom Q 5v5 op. Cross Swords Custom Q Fishing Mace needs 1 more player. By Kuno, crazy. Skull and Crossbones The Real Winnie was killed by Hog2 Rydrog with 20.0 health. Skull and Crossbones Input to Z1835 was killed by KN_413 with 15.2 health. 1 bug. Cross Swords Custom Q 5v5 op net. Welcome. Ultraman 7906 to Flamefrags. Airplane Webstore store.flamefrags.com. Envelope discord.gg/flame. Welcome. Ultraman 7900. Cross Swords Custom Q Netherite Mace needs 16 more players for. Skull and Crossbones Kaliman was killed by Chobro 1234 with 18.5 health. Skull and Duels Cross Swords Custom Q Netherite Mace needs 17. Steel, GG. Cross Swords Custom Q Skull and Crossbones Solvidwalk 8815. Skull and Cross Swords Custom Q Fishing Mace. Skull and Crossbones. Skull and Crossbones. Cross Swords Custom. Skull and Crossbones. N4 shy ____ GG. Skull and Crossbones Swag Ducky was killed by Black Falcon 365 with 20.0 health. Cross Swords Custom Q join only. AJ needs 1 more player for 1v1. Snapdream 123X was killed by Prisches Z_ with 11.3. Skull and Crossbones Duels your Skull and Crossbones Weston 265,400. Skull and Crossbones Spoken Muscle 260 was killed by King Lukaluk with 14.3 health. Skull and Crossbones Solvidwalk 8850. Skull and Crossbones Cross Swords Custom Q Custom Match needs 8 more players for 5v5. Skull and Crossbones Marisklin was killed by Dar Liang with 20.0 health. Skull and Crossbones. Chris 62991 was killed by Black Falcon 365 with 19.8 health. Skull and Crossbones. Musfs was killed by WW_ with 9.3 health. Skull and Crossbones. Kelfrcandle was killed by Tendros 2714 with 20.0 health. Cross Swords Custom Queue join 5v5 needs 5 more players for 5v5 on Forest join. Skull and Crossbones. Cross Swords Custom Queue. Scotty Joseph W. Duels your game. Discord. Stay up to date with all announcements, giveaways, events and much more. Join the Flame. Skull and Crossbones. Jake. Skull and Crossbones. Zanderberger was killed by Yoon 60311 with 9.2 health. Yoon 60311. GG. Skull and Crossbones. MildPython 37978 was killed by XBloody with 18.7 health. Cross Swords Custom Queue. Woodsword needs 5 more players for 3v3 on Forest join here. Skull and Crossbones. Egarian Masters was killed by Zembu with 10.0 health. Skull and Crossbones. VXGoku3 was killed by Zach calculating 57 with 19.9 health. Cross Swords Custom Queue custom match needs 5 more players for 5v5 on Coral join here. Niterdon WYAK /. Skull and Crossbones. Lukacs skill was killed by 3 Marcus 4 with 20.0 health. Skull and Crossbones. Mo 12,345,337 was killed by Manilex with 18.3 health. Ruben Coet stop running. Skull and Crossbones. Axel Pro was killed by Zero Nick with 9.1 health. Skull and Crossbones. Mats2FF was killed by Zenkako with 10.5 health. Skull and Crossbones. Amin 5109 was killed by Lechumjo with 20.0 health. Spiel Spammer. Lechumjo GG. Cross Swords Custom Queue Pure Tina needs 5 more players for 3v3 on Forest join here. Spiel Bo Spammer. Spiel Cringe. Cross Swords Custom Queue Woodsword needs 5 more players for 3v3 on Forest join here. Cross Swords Custom Queue custom match needs 3 more players for 5v5 on Coral join here. Skull and Crossbones. Ovenatoro was killed by Colin 13 with 20.0 health. Skull and Crossbones. Mesnik Good was killed by Philip MR 2013 with 18.8 health. Skull and Crossbones. Roilavi 2341 was killed by Veritas Kaiju with 8.0 health. Skull and Crossbones. Lucas 3009M was killed by Ivan 30 million.